Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Because, yeah, we're going to hold you to the fire, but the fire is going to alchemize you. We're just not quite there yet of like, oh, bad shit's happened to men. That's why a lot of them do bad shit. And on some level, if I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go fuck shit up. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to build $1 billion empire. And someone's like, whoa, toxic masculinity. Why don't you take a back seat? We need to have compassion for the perpetrators to get them to stop perpetrating. Like, it wasn't until I think the late 80s when men could actually be diagnosed with depression. You have to be surrounded by other brothers, not biological, but like other men who go, hey man, you're not doing as well as you can. And we love you. And so we want to see you do better. But really, it's about connection. It's about belonging. It's about feeling like we have a place here, right? I remember at 40, and I have a graduate degree. I've studied medicine. At 40, I had the realization what happened to me in my past may still be informing my present. And it was like, oh. This is Traver Boehm, and you are listening to Airey Bros Radio.
Yeah, I mean, we heard about you a long time ago, back when it was the Wadcast podcast.
No kidding.
Yeah, and you talked about your retreat in darkness.
Yeah.
And then another friend of the podcast, Rob Earth, aka Ronnie Teasdale. We're big fans of him as well.
Yeah.
And I recently saw, he came up on your podcast.
Yeah.
And so then I took a deep dive into everything that you got going on, revisited, the darkness stuff. And I was just like, man, this is the kind of stuff we talk about. It's like, sometimes I just feel like I'm walking around in Denver here, and I feel like people are out to get me just because something's hanging between my legs. You know what I mean? So yeah, we love everything that you're doing, and we'd love to get into all that and talk about it, because I feel like it's such an important topic, concept, something that we need to really focus on, because like I said, certain places like here in Denver, it seems like toxic masculinity is rolls off people's tongues way too easy. And I've even had, men say that to me, or men talk about their white privilege. And I'm like, whoa, we've got to readjust and tap into some things, because I don't think anything about being masculine is toxic.
I don't either. And it's if you want to dive right into it, I think there's definitely ways to have a toxic relationship to your masculinity. But there's ways to have toxic relationships to anything. To me, toxic masculinity is a nice bow that a simple bow we put on complicated problems that lets people sleep at night saying like, okay, cool, we've identified our boogeyman. We don't have to do anything about it. And now we have this catch-all phrase that any bad behavior, especially bad behavior done by a man, gets classified into. It's just an oversimplification. And I understand it, and this is going to upset a lot of people, but most people don't have the intelligence or the time and energy to really look at something and see the nuance. To see like, well, if we look at it from this angle, it's X. If we look at it from this angle, it's Y. So it's like, okay, it's toxic masculinity. Good. All right, let's go get some lattes. Let's call it a day. We did our shit. We saved the world today, right? And it doesn't actually invite us to look at what's underneath that, and then what's underneath that, and now we're getting down to the root. Okay, we don't really want to get to the root, because if we get to the root, one, we can't keep bitching and complaining about the branch, but two, we're going to actually have to do something. So we are in a very, I think, unique time culturally and socially where we've never been louder about our challenges, and we've never done less work about our actual challenges. So there's a whole bunch of yelling and screaming and posturing and, sign making and parading and complaining, but not a lot of, okay, if you really want to shift this, here's what we have to do. Are you willing to do that? Oh, you're not. Okay, cool. Go back to masquerading and pretending to be part of the solution while actually just contributing to the problem. That's my view on it.
Yeah. So you're doing a lot of great stuff in terms of, you have the man group and some of the online stuff. And that's, like Jimmy said, that sort of stuff resonates with us. And, if you could tell our audience more about what that sort of stuff is, and then we can get into that.
Sure. So, I'm one of the people who was very blessed. Yes, COVID was awful. It's still awful. It's done a ton of damage. But my idea, I was on a book tour last year, which got stopped unceremoniously a couple weeks ago last year. And so my goal was to go out and spread the word and spread the message about, one, this group that I had called the Uncivilized Nation, which was teams of men all over the world who were meeting every month and following a curriculum of how to work through and unfuck themselves from what culture had told them men were supposed to be and how they were supposed to act. And when the book tour got canceled, I took it all online and just said, okay, what if I started holding free Zoom calls of guys, here's what you're being told. Here's why I don't think that's true. Here's another way to look at it. And that, you guys, just snowballed. It just became this thing that was like, started with 10 guys and now we're up to 200 men, 12 different locations that have opened. It's just, I think we have another one in Houston starting this week. It's just blossomed because here's what guys need. They need a space with which they can share about their lives without judgment, without the term toxic masculinity hanging over them, where they can say, yeah, you know what? I fucked up. I've made some mistakes in my life. And wow, some shit's happened to me that no one really wants to hear about. No one really cares that I watched my dad beat the shit out of my mom, that when they got divorced, every time I was at his house, he just ridiculed me and got drunk and beat me. No one wants to hear about that. But that man, he needs to say that. And he needs to say it in an environment of strength and support, or strength-based support. So he's not being coddled. It's not and I love women. It's not a bunch of women hanging around telling him that it's okay. It's a bunch of guys saying, you know what, that must have been awful. And I can relate to you in this way. And because you just said that and shared that with me, I now feel like I'm closer to you. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. Now, what are you going to do about living your life differently? Because you're not responsible for what happened to you, but you're sure as shit responsible for the hurt and trauma that you may put out into the culture because you've been hurt and traumatized. So it was just this like ground level movement, guys, that, this was not what I thought I was going to be doing with my life. And yet when I first presented it on social media, it blew up. And the response from men was so interesting. It was, I've looked, I've searched, I've been all over trying to find a pathway that makes sense to me. This makes sense to me. And that was just my intuition coming out on paper. So to have it validated by so many men went, okay, I'm on to something here. Yes, the fact that women liked it, great. But that wasn't what I was after. I was after the male response of saying, this work saved my marriage. This work got me to stop drinking. I was going to kill myself, and then I found your work. I built a business because I found this message. That's what I'm really after, is a cultural shift of men having a third option, right? Like when I first dove into the masculinity question, it was either like go left, which was, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I want to be, elite military billionaire, Dan Bilzerian, 5 Lamborghinis, fuck check models all day. Or I'm going to be a very soft, skinny jean. God bless you. Sorry if you wear skinny jeans, like vegan feminist poet or spiritualist. And I'm just going to do yoga all day and not produce anything. And I know those are gross oversimplifications, but you guys get my point. But I was like, where's the middle ground? I want to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I want to combine them into something that's uniquely mine. Or I want to acknowledge and express both sides of myself, but I don't want to get pigeonholed. And so really that was the option I think my work gave men, and why it's been so popular.
I think you hit it right on the head with men being vulnerable, because in our society today, we're not really allowed to be vulnerable. Even though females might say they want someone who's vulnerable and connected to their emotions, they don't want to hear what you have to say or what's really going on. That has blew up in my face numerous times. And it's one of these things, we're supposed to be these, like you said, this Navy SEAL, Dan Bilzerian type, and that's the toxic masculinity. Yet when I start talking about my feelings and emotions and trying to have rationale and trying to talk things out, that's not the way to go either. So to have a group of men like-minded that can talk about their feelings, get down with their feelings, not go all the way on the other side wearing the skinny jeans and the clear frames, but also meet somewhere in the middle and be men, do men stuff, and also be vulnerable. I think that's awesome. And I think we need more of that. So I'm stoked to hear that this year has been good for you and what you got going on, the other men looking for, because in the world going on right now, there aren't a lot of groups. We can't talk about this stuff. You got to, like Richie said, especially in Denver, you got to watch when you're walking, because you have a penis and balls between your legs. People are going to judge you, right? You don't have that neon pink hair. People are going to judge you. So to have that like-minded group of men, that's awesome.
Yeah, we as a culture, guys, we're not quite comfortable with the idea that we need to have compassion for the perpetrators to get them to stop perpetrating. Like, I'm not going to stand in front of you guys and be like, men don't do bad things. Like, we pretty much lead every negative statistic. But now what we haven't stopped and asked is, why is that? And how do we shift that? Right? The why to me is half importance. What's really important is how we shift it. But how we shift it has to come with acknowledging the why. So the guy that I talked about 5 minutes ago, whose dad used to beat the shit out of him, who was an alcoholic, who made fun of him, who teased him relentlessly, who abused him and all the things, when he gets out in society, and what do you know? He drinks a lot. What do you know? He gets mad and punches holes in walls. What do you know? He's not really that emotionally available. I want to know why. Well, sure as shit, that's why. It's not that this is just someone who grew up in a really loving container of a home and has been supported by both sides, and now like he's just a fuck up. We have to look at the root. And we're just starting to realize that men have been traumatized, that little boys have been traumatized, that men get sexually assaulted, that little boys get sexually assaulted. I'm not Catholic and I don't have anything against the Catholic Church, but man, if you want to talk about a group that probably should have been canceled, there's like 10,000 priests who gotten, like, literally, that's like that high. And yet where was the outcry? I think there wasn't as much because it was boys who were being molested. We're just not quite there yet of like, oh, bad shit's happened to men. That's why a lot of them do bad shit. And so what we've done is we've thrown the baby out with the masculine bathwater. It's like, oh, men do bad shit, all men bad. Men do bad shit, all masculinity bad. Men do bad shit. We can have like little boys making gun finger things in kindergarten need to be expelled. Like we've lost our collective minds a bit as a culture because we're still chasing the branches. We go like, okay, if we just get rid of men, then this whole problem goes away. You're like, well, there's like a couple billion of us. So, and there's like more born every day. So it's going to be a challenging problem. Why don't we actually shift? If we go back to the word, why don't we shift culture? And what I've seen from groups, from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups, is that you talked about it, Jimmy, when a man gets seen, when he goes, hey, this fucked up thing happened to me and I'm really upset today, or my wife just left, or my kid's sick, I'm scared because I don't know what to do about my business. And there's someone in front of him that can handle that. That can be like, you know what? I've been there. And I'm going to tell you something. It sucks. And that's it. I'm not going to give you any advice. I'm not going to try to fix you. I'm just going to say that fucking sucks, man. I'm so sorry. Like that right there, we've gotten like 90% of the healing that guy needs to get out. Like that's not a guy who then goes home and beats his wife. That's not a guy who then goes into King Supers with an AK. It's not a guy who goes and drinks a fifth of vodka and drives his car into a tree. That's a guy who goes, wow, thanks guys. I feel much better. And he goes and like does some great shit at work. He goes and like takes care of his kids. It's again, we're 90% of the problem is that we don't want to look at men as human. That's a big, big problem. That will perpetuate everything that we say we want to stop. And until we look at us as humans, this shit will continue. And it will continue and it will continue. And yes, there's going to be aberrations, right? Like there's going to be the 1% of all people who are psychopaths or sociopaths, and there's nothing we can do about that. But if we look at an iceberg, like I'd rather get rid of the bottom of the iceberg than just focus on the tip. And that's what we need to do as a culture.
Once we identify the why, I mean, within the group, what is the how in terms of, is it just providing the open space, given the ability to open up and communicate and feel like you can be vulnerable in a masculine environment? I mean, is that what this really entails? I know in some of the other like man tribes or man groups, you know, there's breath work, there's ice baths and those
Sure.
sorts of things. And, you know, getting your toes into the dirt and the earth and that sort of stuff. I mean, is that similar to what we've got going on with what you're working with?
It's helpful, right? Like that's the window dressing. That's the like, cool. It's really hard to also like just to sell to a group of men. Like, hey, you 15 guys, give up your Friday night. We're going to come and talk about our feelings. And I get it. Like, I'm not sure I want to go to that meeting.
I'm in.
But if
Though,
you're like,
I'll tell you.
Yeah, when's the next one?
right? But if we're like, hey, you know what? Like I sat in an ice bath for 8 minutes or 7.5 minutes last week. That was one of the most like people were so curious about how I could do that. Okay, cool. So guess what? We're going to come sit in an ice bath. Yeah, we're going to do breath work so that you actually experience something. But here's men learn by modeling. We watch other guys do shit. That's how we learn. That's what gives us permission. So if our entire lives, anytime we've been vulnerable or open or shared an emotion, we've been shut down, we've been abused, we've been yelled at, we've been called a pussy, we've been shamed, we've been whatever it was, then that's the modeling that we have. Now, if you go to a meeting and maybe there's some breath work and maybe there's some ice baths and maybe there's some standing on the ground and maybe there's some like shooting a bow and arrow or whatever, but a guy goes, hey, I really need to share something with the group here and it's going to be hard for me to say. And he says it. And the other guys are like, fuck yeah, man. Good for you. Appreciate that you did that. You gave me permission to feel something that I hadn't felt. I feel closer to you and I can trust you. Like, thank you for that. Then there's a dude in the back who's like, wait a minute. This is interesting. He just got like celebrated. Those guys said they trust him. They feel closer to him. They're happier having been here. Huh. That gives him permission to do it. Then he needs to come and he needs to have that same rep, right? He gets the repetition under his belt and goes home and is like, holy shit. It's okay for me to feel. It's okay for me to have bad things happen and tell guys and still get support. It's a mix, Richie. It's not just because ice baths are great, but we don't have like a lack of ice bath problem in America. Like that's not like, that's not the root of the issue. So it's a bit of window dressing and I get it, right? I do it too, but really it's about connection. It's about belonging. It's about feeling like we have a place here. For 30 years of my life, I heard, we don't need men. We don't need you. We don't need you. We don't need you. Right? It's in the culture. It's in sitcoms. It was in my house. It was in everything I read. We don't need men. And so what do you know? We have a couple generations of guys who are like, I don't really know what to do. So I'm going to smoke a lot of dope and play a lot of video games and jerk off a lot because I just don't know what else to do. And on some level, if I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go fuck shit up. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to build $1 billion empire. And someone's like, whoa, 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 toxic masculinity. Why don't you take a back seat? Right? Then what's this guy supposed to do? We are the doers. Like, we do shit. And I'm not saying that men don't need to feel more and we don't need to be in our bodies and be certain things, but we have to be doing. We are the builders. We are, masculine energy is outward. So it's got to be this mix of both. We've seen generations, at least my generation, my dad's generation, I'm 45. We saw what happens when you only do and you don't feel. And now we're kind of in 2021. You guys just talked about it, and I see it because I get, God, if I don't get the phone calls and the DMs and from their girlfriends and wives, we have a lot of guys that just want to be, but they don't want to do anything. And they're miserable. They're depressed, right? They're upset. They're underperforming. And their partners are like, hey, I don't want to date a chick. No offense. Or I don't want to date someone or marry someone who's not motivated, who's not doing anything in the world. That we've confused the masculine for the feminine there. We are the doers. So yeah, so I know that was a long-winded answer to a short question, but it's a mix of both.
No, I love it. You're speaking our language, and it sounds like you grew up in the same house we did. I'm 45 as well, and yeah, I mean that's that generational that baby boomer generation, and we are recovering Catholics, and so we also have I have a belief, a philosophy that there was some, because my father was brought up in Catholic school and was an altar boy and that sort of stuff. And so I feel like there is some things that have never been communicated that maybe had some traumas that led to anger and aggression and acting out in weird ways without alcohol because of that. So yeah, I can relate to all that stuff. And we joke about it where we say, you know, no one really gets out of childhood without some trauma, male or female.
For sure.
And we shouldn't, it's not a pissing contest. Like, I'm not trying to compare my traumas to your traumas or say one is greater than the other. Like, when you're a little kid, trauma is trauma. And as we know, as we've gotten older and got more woo-woo, you know, that trauma can manifest its way in many different ways and shapes. But I think, back to what you were saying about the group, having the ability in an environment like that to just be able to get that out there, to be vulnerable but not feel like you're going to be being judged, I think that allows you to open up the door for ownership and then healing and then doing shit.
Yeah. So if you guys think about this, like, so many men, they're like ticking time bombs because they're just walking around with so much pain. And we go, okay, where is it socially acceptable to release that pain? It's not. It's just not. We don't cry. We don't go on, like, we just don't do it. We tell men, we actually have this saying, like, you got to fucking man up. You got to man up. Right? We don't say you got to woman up, but we say it to men. And so, or anytime if a guy is given like 1% emotion and that's gotten shut down or shamed, then what about that like cauldron of grief that he's sitting on? Because you're right, nobody escapes childhood untraumatized, but a lot of kids get out of childhood like severely traumatized. And a lot of those are boys. And even if it's not just boys, it's men in their 20s. It's men who've gone to war. It's men who've been in the military. It's men who've been in the police department, in the fire department. It's men who've just had shit happen to them. And that different quality of emotion called grief will literally rip your life apart if you don't access it and release it in a safe, healthy container. And so if we're not even allowed to be sad, then how the hell are we going to get to grief? We're not. And so I'm not excusing like the atrocious or the atrocities that men commit, but I understand them. Right? I watched this amazing video of a woman who went into a maximum security prison and had all these guys in a circle, huge out in the yard, right? Like in the exercise yard. and I was on a microphone and was like, step forward if you got beaten under the age of 5. And it was like 50% of the group walked forward. I was like, step forward if you grew up in extreme poverty. People walk forward. Step forward if you were abused emotionally and told you were worthless, and like all this horrible shit. And what do you know? Like everybody's walking forward. We're like, huh, fascinating that you guys all ended up in prison. Fascinating. Right? When we can say, like, I didn't have a capital T traumatizing life. Like I didn't have some big thing happen to me, but man, I was traumatized and I know how I acted out. Now, maybe if you'd put me in a different environment where there was meth or guns or other ways to do really severe damage, I would be right in there with them. And so we also have to have a bit of compassion. It's like, okay, everybody's been fucked up. And now what are the situations that create more stress? What are the situations that compound emotion? We know what they are. Not being able to talk about it, not having an outlet, not being seen and heard, not being respected when you share something, right? Not having a place in the world. That like, it's like, just makes that pressure cooker get tighter and tighter and tighter. And then when it does blow, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I didn't think that would ever happen. Like, huh, let's look at this guy's history, right? His kid died. He got hooked on heroin. His wife left. He lost his job. Like, okay, fuck. That can happen now that we saw it with COVID, to anybody. Like, oh, he needed to have more willpower. Like, where were the guys around him? Where was this team of men? I, again, can't tell you how many times I've seen, because I run an organization of men, how many times a guy will pop up on our website in like the comment section and say, hey guys, I got this thing going on. And I'm not okay. And then it's 5 guys. Boom, 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 boom. What's your phone number? Like, I'm just going to hop on a call with you. Oh yeah, by the way, a couple of years ago, I went through something similar. Can we go grab coffee? Like, imagine if like every dude who's struggling or is going through something big had that level of support. That would shift things radically. I remember when I found out I was getting divorced, the next day, my 2 best friends were like, we're getting on a plane and coming to California. I was like, how fucking lucky am I that these guys have the ability, the finances, and just the willingness, and that I have 2 guys in my life who with one phone call were like, whoop, we're coming to make sure you're okay. Because if I'm okay, then I'm not going to go to Trader Joe's and beat the shit out of someone in the parking lot because they cut me off. But a lot of guys just don't have that. And it happens over and over and over, you guys, where I see it, where I'm like, oh, thank God this guy got intervention of support. And they're not like professional. They're not like, I'm a psychologist, I can handle this. I'm a trauma trained therapist, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm an addiction specialist. It's like, no, this is John. He's an accountant, but he went through what you're going through. He went through this last year. So get on the phone with John. He's not going to give you the 7-point guideline on how to solve your problem, but he's going to listen to you and go, oh yeah, I remember that. That sucked. Like, oh yeah, I remember those days. It's the worst, isn't it? And just that empathy is going to be what saves that man.
And you were saying before that you have spouses or girlfriends that contact you about their significant other not being a doer, right? Kind of being caught in their own bullshit. How many guys do you deal with, or do you think that are out there that don't even know they're dealing with trauma and kind of just spinning the wheel around every day and haven't even taken that look back to, oh, maybe this is what I'm dealing with that's kind of holding me back? And how do you think we can kind of bring it to the forefront of people's thinking if they're caught in a vicious loop to kind of, hey, maybe there's something that's going on here that's subconscious that you're not even aware of?
It's such an amazing question, Jimmy. I'm just going to make up a percentage. Like 99. I don't know, like way more than not, because it just hadn't gotten into the collective male conscious, right? I remember at 40, and I have a graduate degree. I've studied medicine. At 40, I had the realization what happened to me in my past may still be informing my present. And it was like, oh, holy shit. And so it just hasn't gotten in the male conversation. Like it wasn't until I think the late 80s when men could actually be diagnosed with depression. We didn't even think it like that didn't happen to men. Like, oh no, it happens to men. It's crazy. It's this weird thing that testosterone doesn't like disallow us from having emotions and mental issues. So one, it needed to get in the literature. Then it needed to get into the common conversation. And I think as much as social media is the devil, it's also amazing in that it gives us so much access to information that wasn't available before, right? Like I can read Esther Perel's daily thoughts on her Instagram page, as opposed to 5 years ago, I might have had to spend $5,000 to go to a workshop with her. So it's seeping into the conversation, but I would say most, because I also get the phone call from the dude who's like, hey, my wife says she's going to leave me if I don't talk to you. And so what the fuck do you want from me? And I'm like, tell me about your life. He's like, nothing. Everything's great, man. Like, really? So you drink 6 nights a week, you smoke a lot of pot, and like you haven't had sex in 2 years. That's okay. That's interesting. Tell me more. Like, is there a time you remember in your, oh, okay. Like your dad died when you were 20 and that's when you started drinking. You think that may have anything to do with, no, nothing to do with it. Okay, well, let's just ask a couple more questions. I loved my dad. He was everything to me. Okay. Did you cry at the funeral? No. Why not? I'm not a fucking bitch. Okay, cool. Have you gone to, no, I haven't gone to therapy. Why? Therapy's for weak people. Okay, cool. Yeah, why don't you come have a seat? Right. And how many guys listening to that were like, oh, that's me. Because what we have to do is replace the idea that seeking help, that going to therapy, that acknowledging that there may be something that's bigger than you is a sign of weakness. That is the number one like glitch in the male software. I have something that I can't handle. Therefore, there's something wrong with me. Not I have something that I can't handle because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than my facilities or my faculties or whatever. Right? Like when I wanted to learn jujitsu, I wasn't like, I don't know jujitsu because I'm weak. I was like, no, I don't know jujitsu because no one's taught me jujitsu. So I went to a jiu-jitsu school. Like part of the male brain figures shit out of like, I want to get stronger. I go to the gym. But because there's so much shame, like no one was like, do you know why you don't know jiu-jitsu? Because you're just a little bitch. And they were like, no, because you've never been to a jiu-jitsu school, right? But if like, hey, I don't know how to deal with my overwhelming grief because of my childhood pain, we'll be like, you can't do that because you're a little bitch. Or if you do go and you talk to someone, you're just weak. You got to be able to figure this out on your own. So that, to answer your question, Jimmy, like that's a big part of it. And we as men have to be the first ones to lead it. Right? Like I'll be in the middle of a group and be like, who's in therapy right now? And have guys raise their hands, like everybody applaud them. Tell them, thank God, God bless you. I'm in fucking therapy. Like I think everyone at birth should be like, here's a social security number. Here's a therapist. Ready? Go. Things would be a lot different. So really that's how, but it's starting, right? It's starting. 5 years ago when I told people like, yeah, I'm starting this men's idea. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is, what are you guys going to go out in the woods and like rub period blood on your faces and drum naked? And I was like, no, I don't, like maybe. Not this weekend. Yeah, exactly. Well, now that you bring it up, no, we're not actually. We're not.
I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah. That's the VIP program. But now when I say it, like it's still this weird thing, right? Like it's still. I started, you guys, because you guys heard me on the Wadcast podcast. I was at a CrossFit gym in I think 2007, and no one knew what the hell CrossFit was. And then I opened my own gym in 2009. And for a year, it was still being like, hey, it's this thing. We do these weird exercises. It's a lot like exercise you've seen before, but then we do it for time. And people were like, wow, this is fascinating. And then a year later, it was like, oh, I know exactly what you do. Now everybody knows what CrossFit. Now it's like, what's the first rule of CrossFit, right? So I think that's going to be the case with men's work. In 5 years from now, it's going to be a very clear delineation of either you're in, as a man, you're involved with other men in some capacity, or you're going to be kind of struggling on your own. And it'll be an easy fix and an easy find, because just like there's like 9 CrossFit gyms on every block, there will be 9 men's groups in your town as opposed to 1 in your state. At least that's my goal.
Yeah, that's huge. You mentioned it was like, was it until the 80s you said men
I think so.
weren't
Yeah.
able to be
really
diagnosed
late.
with depression? Is that
Yeah.
the year, around there? And then also, you talk about the benefits of therapy and having a therapist and going to therapy sessions, but there's professions where if you go to therapy, you're in jeopardy of losing your job. Like that's a real thing. And unfortunately, most of those sorts of professions that comes with are male dominated professions. So to have an outlet like this where, yeah, we can go on a Friday night and we might not, run around a fire and rub period blood on her face, but we might do some breath work and some ice baths. But at the end of the day, we're giving you a place where you can come and talk about this. And the other thing that I've learned now at 45 is that I'm not alone. I'm not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more I talk to people, the more we have conversations like this, the more I have traveled around and lived in different areas in the country and made new friends. We're all, like I said, we're all dealing with stuff like this, but having the place, the outlet to go and do this sort of stuff and talk about this sort of stuff is huge, because certain professions, whether it's law enforcement, pilots, just a few off the top of my head, like if they find out you're going for therapy for PTSD, depression, whatever it may be, you're done. And then there goes your livelihood. And then that spirals into a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy if we think about that? And if we look at the professions, I'm just going to imagine that have the highest rates of divorce, alcoholism, suicide, domestic abuse. They're also the ones where it's most poo-pooed to go to therapy. Like you can almost draw a direct correlation and go, holy shit. And there are also a lot of them where we give people guns. And so I don't know about you guys, but I would love for the dude who's carrying a gun to actually have to talk to a therapist.
You would think it would be mandated.
Mandatory, right? Right. A buddy of mine, the guy who runs the nation with me, is an ex-cop, and he just put something up today about a woman who stabbed her 3 kids. I don't know if it was in LA or Chicago today. And he goes, someone walked into that room and found that with a badge and a gun on. Some human, probably a father or a mother, right? Someone's going home tonight to their family after seeing 3 stabbed children. Again, I don't know about you guys, but there should be like, stop, you're going to a therapist. We're still going to pay you. We're still going to support you. But just human to human, like imagine if that was our afternoon. Like, hey, I had this great podcast and then I went and saw 3 stabbed kids. Like I would be in fucking therapy for the next 10 years. Not like, hey, take the afternoon off, have a hot shower, grab a beer, come back tomorrow. And by the way, don't talk about this or we're going to fire you. You're like, what is going on? What are we doing? Like, there's this video that went around the internet for a bit of this like 2-year-old and a bunch of bubble tape and him just like slamming his forehead into the bubble tape. And that's like how I feel when I hear these stories. Like, wait a minute. If they go to therapy, they get fired? Oh, boom. Oh, boom. Yeah. But this is how it's starting, right, Richie? It's starting. And at least you're right. That guy does have an option. And I have a ton of law enforcement and a ton of ex-military guys in the nation because they're not at risk. But yet that doesn't solve, it needs to be in the military. It needs to be in policing. We're just starting to understand that, man, PTS is a real thing. It is a real thing. God bless the guys that went to Vietnam and came back and they're like, okay, cool. Good luck to you. try not to get hooked on heroin. Right? Like our dad's generation of just, no wonder so many of those guys drank. No wonder so many of those guys just were shut down. Like I feel for them. My heart breaks for how many of those men came back and were just devastated. And what do we know? We sent them over there at like 17, 18, like because they're men. No, they're children in men's bodies. So we're just, our whole attitude around men needs to shift. And when it does, the problems men cause will shift with them. Until we do, we're just pissing in the ocean.
Yeah, Traver, I think a real important thing that you're doing is, we're bringing awareness around these issues. We just talked about police officers, pilots. They're not allowed to talk about these things. But the thing that concerns me the most, I'm 34, but I'm finishing up my sophomore year in film school right now. I've been on a campus since 2019, and not to sound like that old guy, but the youth. I lucked out. I had an older brother that was 11 years older than me, got me into wrestling, got me into running, doing jujitsu, and that's kind of how I came up and learn to be a man in some aspects of things and how to deal with things. But I don't think the youth have outlets like that, or maybe they're not being brought up the same. How do we go about and saving these younger men coming up and kind of giving them an outlet? And what do you think are some of the things that should be done at a young age to kind of combat what's going on with gender right now? Because I think it's a tough world to grow up in right now as a man. Like, yeah, we have to deal with stuff as older men, but to be a 15, 16, 20 something and not have strong men in your life, I think that's a hard thing to have to combat. And when the news and everyone around you is telling you shouldn't be a man, or, you might be a woman, I think that's kind of hard if you don't have any strong male role models.
100%, man. 100%. I just led a course called Kill the Nice Guy. And nice guy is capital N, capital G here. It's not like kill the kind person. It's a particular set of patterns that men have. And this particular set of patterns that men have, I asked all the guys on week 1, walk me back to the first time you can remember being rejected. And that was my goal. And this is what I didn't expect to come from that question, right? It was like, oh, Susie Johnson in 4th grade told me that I was ugly and punched me in the nose and ran away. And now what do you know? I like jerk off to a lot of porn. That's what I thought I was going to get. What I got, which was even more fascinating, guys, was what came out of that call was, when was the first time you learned it's not okay to be a man? All of those guys, everybody who had codependence, everybody who had been addicted to drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, extra, whatever it was, these were the underperformers. These were the guys who were coalescing, that were collapsing as men, who weren't leading and wanted to step into a leadership role. Every single one of them could identify the point where they learned it's not okay to be a man. So I have so much compassion for the younger generation that could probably tell you multiple times a day when they're hearing it's not okay to be a man. It's not okay to be a man. I wrote my book in the middle of Me Too, which I have nothing against Me Too. I think it should have happened. Male shitty behavior needed to come out of the shadow and into the light. But what I was so frustrated with at the time was waking up every morning to another article in the New York Times or Washington Post or whatever, being like, men are bad, men are bad, men are bad. And then I would look at the bottom of the article and be like, well, what do we do? And there was never, it was just like, oh no, this is just a men are bad article. And so I was like, wait, I think I can shift this. I think I actually have a way to shift this, but it's going to be stop talking about just men are bad, men are bad. So to answer your question, those young men need to be in conversation with, hear this word, initiated older men. So not just older dudes, not just guys who are in their 50s who are also acting like 14-year-olds, but men who have lived through some shit. Men who have lost, men who have built, men who have gotten divorced, men who have been sick, men who have gone through the initiation of therapy or the initiation of trauma and recovery. Like, we don't have elders in our society. We have old guys But how many of us go, yeah, I have this counsel. I have it, but not many people have a counsel of 3 or 4 guys in their 70s who go, yeah, I've been through some shit. I built companies. I've lost companies. I've had marriages. I've had divorces. I've raised kids. I've lost kids. I'll give you real advice. Like, I'm so grateful to have them to ping off of. We need to also, as men in our 30s and 40s, go, hey, wait a minute. This thing you're doing to kids right now, you're fucking them up. Do you want to deal with 5-10 years from now, a guy in a male body who is bigger, stronger, faster than 90% of the planet and brimming with testosterone? Do you want to put him in a situation where he has access to women, access to drugs, and access to guns with this massive confusion and anger and hatred because you've taught him not to be okay with himself? You've taught him that there's something wrong with how he was born. That to me sounds like a recipe for disaster. And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen to other groups, but I'm saying when it happens to us, we're the violent ones. We're the ones who shoot up supermarkets. We're the ones who beat our wives. We're the ones who drink and do drugs out of control. Not to say women don't, but we do it with like a little more gusto. So really, Jimmy, it's like we need a national Big Brother program, but in order to be the Big Brother, you can't just be like 30. And I'm not saying age is the defining quality. You actually have to be involved in men's work. You have to be surrounded by other brothers, not biological, but like other men who go, hey man, you're not doing as well as you can. And we love you. And so we want to see you do better. Or guys who go, hey, guess what? You just fucked up. And we know you fucked up. And you're lying to us. So here's your opportunity to come clean. And we're gonna stand here all goddamn night until you do. And we're still gonna love you. And we're still gonna support you. And we're gonna check in with you in 3 days to see how you're doing. Because yeah, we're gonna hold you to the fire, but the fire is gonna alchemize you. So this is how we have to, and I'm telling you guys, I get 2 messages, right? I run a men's movement, primarily followed by women, or at least it was in the beginning. 72% of my social media was female following. 73% of my book buyers for the first year were women. And so I would get 2 messages day in, day out. One, will you start a dating app for guys who have gone through whatever you're trying to teach them so that I can date them? And I was like, nope, find them yourself. Message 2, I am a single mom. I am a mom who's divorced. I am a mom whose husband died. I am a mom whose husband's an alcoholic. And my son needs someone. What do I do? And that, like, to get that, the first time I was like, oh, that's really interesting. The 700th time I was like, holy shit, there's something here. And so yeah, I'm about to start like a teen program. At first I was like, I don't want to do a teen program. And now I was like, okay, message number 700. Okay, we'll start something where young teens have access to initiated older men, because we don't also want to traumatize these young guys. And we've seen with some organizations I won't name, like the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church, that we also can't put uninitiated men in the presence of young boys, because then we get predators. So again, it's like we need this national shift. We need this, like, as a country, to go, oh, it's okay to be a man. Okay, wow. We kind of fucked up for the last 10 years. Sorry about that, everybody. Now we just woke up. Okay, cool. Now, how do we undo the damage that we've done to a current 19-year-old who for 8 years has been told, like, there's no such thing as a man. And if there is, they're bad. Now, don't be a problem in society, right? Oh, by the way, California's on fire. We need a bunch of men to go out and fix that. Oops. Like, oh, we're under attack from a country. Oh, we need a bunch of men who are willing to go die. Oh, there are oil rigs where we need men to go out and work, but you're probably going to die. Oh, we need firemen and police. Okay, we need men. Oops. Okay, we're confused as fuck. So maybe everybody just turns their TV off for like 2 weeks and then goes, oh, that's right. That's right. Whoopsie. Sorry about 2015 to 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what you've been saying, we've had quite a few guests and conversations on here where we also talk, part of the problem in what you were saying is, as a society, we don't have rites of passages, or if we do, they're ridiculous, and it's not really, in terms of human history, what is considered a rite of passage, or what other, tribal societies or third world countries may still do as rite of passages. And that's, one of the things that's been brought up and people talk about as they're, raising their young kids, is like, this is something that I'm going to incorporate into my children's life, is that there are going to be rites of passages. And I think that, coupled with, having people men that have been through the program, so you weed out and get rid of the predators, and you get away from that stranger danger type of mentality. And yeah, you just have that 75-year-old, grizzly vet, that sits on his stoop, and you can go sit there and talk to him, conversations, and listen to his stories, and learn from him like you would go to a sage on a mountaintop, sitting in samadhi, and getting that advice, like breaking down those walls and allowing that to be a thing, and saying, yeah, go talk to Mr. Jones or whoever, and not feeling like you're worried about it. But then also having, martial arts, you get it, it's kind of like a rite of passage. You learn a lot of things. And as much as I shake my head hearing Joe Rogan talk about the importance of jujitsu, like, I think, whether it's wrestling or jujitsu or karate or taekwondo, I think there is like a real benefit to a martial art in terms of a discipline, a rite of passage, and learning to put in the time to get those, what's the word I'm looking for? Promotions, through the belt system and the ranking systems. Like, that's all that stuff needs to come together. It needs to come back. And, if you heard the most recent podcast that Joe wrote with Dan Gable, he talked about his parents needed help, and their help was bringing Dan to the YMCA to get him into wrestling. That he had a rough home life and everything, and his parents were okay with acknowledging that they needed help. They brought to a place like the YMC where he learned wrestling, and obviously he dealt with some things that no one should have to deal with, but it elevated him to who he was and who he is, and guy's a legend.
Yeah, it's a bigger, again, cultural conversation, but I think I'm going to butcher this quote, but there's Sebastian Junger, if you know him, the author. He said, like, we come into masculinity by facing things that will kill us. And what I've been taught about initiation is that an initiation is a controlled death. Controlled. So it's the death of the boy. It's the death of your ego. Anyone who's been divorced has been initiated. Anybody who's been through a really bad breakup has been initiated. Anyone who's gone to war has been initiated. Anyone who's dealt with significant loss. You can look back at your life through all of these initiation points. But we specifically need to go, there needs to be a demarcation between boyhood and manhood. And I know it's not a complete one, but women have a biological demarcation. They get a menstrual cycle, right? They're like, oh, you're a woman now. You hear this in common language. Like, oh, well, congratulations, you're a woman now. And then you've got a 32-year-old guy who plays video games all day. Nothing, and I have nothing against video games, but you get the archetype that I'm trying to create, who's literally like, that's what little kids do. He's just smoking pot. He's just playing video games. He's just living in his parents' basement. Like, you're kind of a big kid. We say this over and over in culture. We hear it over and over in culture. He's just like a little boy running around in a grown man's body. So I think it's wildly vital. And here's the thing about initiation. The final piece of it, this is something that I learned from listening to a lot of Francis Weller's work, is you get returned back into a community of people who have been initiated, right? So a lot of our initiations were like, oh, go in the military. Cool, but what do you come back to? You don't come back to an initiated culture that gets you, that understands you, that's been where you've been, that's passed through the same trials and tribulations. I'm not prior military, But I know a lot of guys who say the only people who understand me are prior military. You're like, oh, you guys all went through the same shit. You need to hang out with each other. So men, we need to go through something that's challenging, that replicates the tribal initiation of being, ripped from the mother's hut, taken out in the woods, scared to death by the elements. I don't know, like fed some peyote and told to kill a deer and then come back. And they're like, guess what, little Bobby? Your name is now Robert. And you don't get to live with the women and children anymore. You get to live with us, the men. And here's the responsibilities that come with being in your body. Here's what we expect from you as a tribe. Here's what's going to happen to you if you fuck up. And here's your big brother. Here's Stuart. He's going to look after you. He's going to mentor you. He's going to guide you. Like that stuff, it's phenomenal that it's missing. And yet, if we think about it from a culture, like how different would that have been? Like, I don't remember anything. It's like, oh, you graduated from high school. Like, cool, now what? Oh, you went to college. Cool, now what? Oh, let me just follow the same track of all these other guys who are lost with no guidance, with no mentorship, with no one saying, hey, I can see you're struggling in these ways. Like you can't see it because you're blind to your own biases, but you can't see it. But we all can. Or like 3 or 4 guys, right? Like that's how we shift this stuff, guys. I think you nailed it, Richie. It's such a missing piece. But how like where's the like where are the rallies in the streets of like, hey, we need to bring initiation back. We're gonna wear like initiated hats and have signs. Like we don't see that. It's like, oh, it's men, fuck them.
I think there's too many men that are married. I think that's our problem.
Look, 8 out of 10 divorces are female led. Why is this? 8 out of 10 male suicides come at the end of a breakup or a divorce. Why is this? Like, in my head, it all makes sense. How many of those guys wanted to get married? How many of those guys are happy? How many of those guys are supported in their marriage? How many of those guys at least once a month get together with other married guys and don't just play poker and get drunk, but actually talk about, hey, what are you going through right now? How can I support you? What are you going through? How can I support you? Here's what I'm going through, guys. Here's the support I need. Let's model what it's like to be in a healthy relationship with each other so that when we go home with people who we have all kinds of intimacy challenges with, because men and women are different, we've at least experienced something healthy and holistic that we can model onto our marriages.
Rich and I have a running. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Rich and I have a running joke that there's none of our married friends that are like, you're missing out, man. You got to get married and have kids. They're all like, yo, keep doing what you're doing. Keep being single. Like, we love living vicariously through you. And I think a lot of it is for men, there's this social pressure to get married. I think for men and women, right? I don't think it's just the man thing. But I think a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm 30. I don't see anyone else coming around. I guess this is my best bet. And then you can see when they have kids and how that kid is raised and everything like that. And I think that's the biggest issue is we're taught to settle in this society. Well, you got someone who likes you, well, you're not going to find anyone better. Just do the deed. And that's where you have kids that are grown and have trauma because they were brought up in a house where, yeah, maybe 2 people liked each other, but there wasn't love in that house and they never got to experience it.
Yeah, 100%. I know a ton of married people who are like, it's amazing. It's the best thing I've ever done. Most of them are on their second marriages. All of them are in the work, right? Like all of them are in the work. All of them are actively like conscious communication, conscious relating, conscious sexuality. They're reading books together. They're going to workshops together. Like this is the thing. I don't know if you guys have ever had business partners, but you just don't started your own businesses. Like I wasn't blessed with the like, oh, I just know how to run a company at 24. Like it was naturally downloaded into me. Nope, didn't do that. Had to like tank 5 companies before having a successful one. Yet we think with relationships, like, it's this, how hard could it be? Right? I'm modeling mom and dad who were a train wreck. And like that software got implanted to me in age 5, but I'll figure this out. right? And she's, oh my God, her parents were a fucking disaster, but she'll be fine. You guys doing anything together on that? Or like, no, it'll just sort itself out. Like, imagine if that was the business mentality. Like, it'll just sort itself out. No, thank you. You have consultants, you have a marketing team, you have divisions, you have meetings, you have conversations, and people still tank. So I'm with you, man. There's so much of I get the guys, you guys who've checked all the boxes and yet they're still miserable. And I probably get 0.01% of the guys who are miserable. And that hurts my heart, because if you're a miserable father, you have a miserable wife and you have miserable kids, or kids growing up in a house of misery. How different would so many upbringings have been if dad actually felt celebrated, if dad actually felt honored, if dad felt like he wasn't a dictator, but he also had the freedom and space to lead, right? And dad was considered important in the raising of the kids. There's so much that we can unpack with, like, where are fathers? Why are fathers poo-pooed? Why are family courts why isn't 50-50 custody the standard unless there's abuse? Why isn't that like, nope, sorry, you guys made these kids together, you get to raise them together after you split up? Like, oh, lots of questions, right? Lots of stuff that we can tease into.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because you always hear people say, oh, being married is work. It's a job in itself. And it's like, well, yeah, what kind of work are you guys doing together? And it's like you said, oh nothing. I do my thing. She does her thing. I have a bank account. She has a bank account. We have a joint account. Yeah. We have the chalkboard on the wall, and, you're getting to soccer practice or this, that, and the other thing. And maybe you talk, for 10 minutes before you go to bed, or 10 minutes in the morning before you go. It's like, so what kind of work are you really doing?
Yeah. And who's lonely? How well do you know each other? How do you feel supported? Like that word is just, for so many guys, is just a foreign concept. Like, do you feel supported in your relationship? Do you feel supported by the 5 men around you? And not just in crisis. Like, sure, at 3:00 in the morning, you're like, all right, I'm going to jail, I can call some people. But what if I'm just having a normal Wednesday? Do I know that guys are like, they're thinking about me? They're there to help me. They're there to support me. Is my partner there to support me? Am I there to support her? Am I able to support her because my cup is so full, it overflows into hers? Is her cup so full that it overflows into mine? Right? This is more high level, kind of advanced relating. But for most people, it's like, you guys hate each other? Because if you don't hate each other, you should probably stop behaving like you do, or pretending that you do. And I get it. There's resentments, there's anger, there's stuff, but like, maybe that's somewhere that you work on. Shocking. Yeah. And I'm going to put a lot of this back on us. I know it's like, guys, you're not happy, do something about it. Read a book, listen to like, there's more information out there than there's ever been in any time in human history. So do some Googling, read some books, follow some guys on Instagram, listen to some podcasts, and make sure that it's not just about making more money. I've worked for billionaires who were miserable, whose lives I would not trade in a heartbeat, ever. Like, I do not want your life, sir. I get it. You just bought a $250 million yacht with a credit card. I do not want your life. I'll take my shit. Where's my rent going to come from this month? I'll take my struggles, because I wake up happy, and I wake up next to someone who's happy.
Love it.
I think your message is super, super important, and I'm grateful that we got to talk to you today and pick your brain on these things. Before we get into rapid fire, one thing I want to ask you about, you said you had owned a CrossFit gym in 2009. Richie and I had got our CrossFit level 1 certs in 2010, so we all witnessed the boom. I just curious, what was your mindset kind of going into CrossFit? What was it when you had the business open in 2009? What was it during the boom? And what is your thoughts on CrossFit these days?
Great questions. I found it because I was a pro fighter and had like a very difficult time with conditioning and just thought, okay, there's something else out there. And when I walked in and did the first workout, it was just like the first time I did jujitsu, where I went home and like lay in bed convulsing, going, what just happened to me? And now I need to figure this out. So I walked out of my first CrossFit workout as a pro fighter, in quotes. Well, I was a pro fighter, but went, okay, I'm now annihilated. What happened to me? I need to figure this out. But what was most important for me is I was involved in a really unique gym. It was CrossFit LA, which was Andy Petronic's gym. And the community there, the culture there was what grabbed me, because it was so supportive. It was all of these really intelligent, athletic humans from all different walks of life congregating around a common thing. No one gave a shit, black, white, Asian, Mexican. No one gave a shit how much money you made. No one gave a shit, white or gay, straight. No one gave a shit about it. It was like all of that stuff got to be outside. What mattered was, how hard are you willing to work? How much are you willing to support someone else? To me, that kind of environment was infectious. So when I went to open my own, really, that's what I was after. I had just graduated from Chinese medicine school and thought, if I really want to help people's health, I can stick needles in them all day, or I can teach them how to squat. I can teach them how to eat. And I was going to add my own flair. I'm going to teach them how to meditate. I'm going to make sure that they have a high self-esteem, that their confidence is good. So I wasn't a quote, like, I was a CrossFitter, but I wasn't like, there weren't competitions back then. So I was very fortunate to get into it before it became the sport of sports, right? And during the boom, yeah, it was amazing. It was incredible to go from fighting how to get someone in the door to having, at one point, we had a wait list in our gym. That's like mind-boggling. And now, I to be honest with you guys, I haven't been involved in the sport in probably 6 years, or in the business in 6 years. I still, at my core, I'm so grateful that it came along and disrupted bicep curls and, bodybuilding, which was really the only option that I felt was available. And I'm really happy. I know this is a podcast primarily about men, that it shifted the culture for women of what was possible around strength, and what was sexy around strength, and what was cool, and what they could aspire to be. Right? I remember so many, when I go into the games, and I can't even remember the girl's name at this point, but there were all these little girls just watching this one female performer and thinking, amazing. You now get to be something else other than a cheerleader. You now get to be something else other than, like, we have the boys sports, and also down here is the girl sports. Like, you get to be a rock star, and that's going to shift so much of your life. So, when I left CrossFit, which was 2016, there was drama, and I was sick of the drama. And this is before Glassman did stupid shit, but I knew, like, I wasn't involved in that and didn't want to be involved in it. So we kept our gym very isolated. I was in Santa Barbara. We weren't sending people to games. I didn't want to send people to games. I remember telling people, like, the gym, when Andy had his gym, I remember him saying, do you know why we're only open for 3 hours Saturday morning? Because I want you guys out there snowboarding, wrestling, surfing, like, living an amazing life. And when I had my gym, it was the same philosophy. But when the games came around, people were like, hey, we need to train twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. And I was like, oh man, we blew it. This whole thing was set up so that you spent more time outside. Now look at you. Like, nobody needs to train 3 times a day as an amateur athlete who's also, an accountant at 42. Like, go live an amazing life. Go surfing. Go in the woods. Go smell a tree. Don't deadlift for the 6th time, in 48 hours. So that's my mini CrossFit rant.
Yeah, we're kind of the same boat too, where, we got into it as athletes to help us at what our sport is, be it grappling, jiu-jitsu, or running and ultra marathoning. And we got drawn into the community aspect of it because, it reminded us of, like, we also had a really good first coach. So it was like, fuck, I feel like I'm back at wrestling practice. I love this. I love the community. And then, I actually literally moved to California so I could be more in depth with CrossFit, worked with Brian McKenzie and CrossFit Endurance and all that crew.
Gotcha.
And so, it was almost like the CrossFit games were the best thing and the worst thing to happen to CrossFit, because same thing. It's like, well, I don't want to be at the gym coaching on Saturday. Like, I want to be out in the woods in the mountains running for 5 hours. Like, I don't need to come here, open the gym for 2 classes, and then start my run at 12 o'clock when I could have been done. So yeah, I always try to focus on the positive with CrossFit. Like, rather than bitching about sumo deadlift, high pull, it's like, let's just not program them. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
or if we don't feel like we need to be competitive or have a competitive team, like, this isn't the gym for you. Like, there's one right around the corner that will train you like that. And, you want to think at 45 as an accountant with 3 kids and a wife that hates you, that, you're going to go to the CrossFit games, and that's the place for you over here. If you just want to train and look good naked and maybe have better sex with your wife, then this is probably the place for you.
Yeah. It did great things. I'm so grateful it came and disrupted the culture. It's so great. And really reminded so many ex-athletes, this is what my life has been like, not being on a team again. This is what it's like to be back on a team. I remember taking a yoga class like after 3 years of CrossFit and be like, you guys don't high five each other at the end of class? Like, it feels so foreign to me. Like, how are you going to go have a kick-ass day if someone doesn't high five you? But like that, like, excitement, like people being cheered for. And it wasn't just the top athlete. It was like, you, the 65-year-old grandmother, you're going to get lit up with high fives, and you're going to get more praise and celebration in the next 5 minutes than you've probably had in the last 10 years. And that to me was like, this is gold. I love it. And then it got complicated.
Yeah. So getting your start at CrossFit LA, did you get an opportunity to WOD with Armin?
Yeah. So he was there right at the, like, I think I'd been there for a year or two right when he showed up. I knew his brother Z, and he was more closer to him. And I think right as Armin came in, I left.
Okay. Just wondering if you got to witness him throw up at all.
He was not the athlete. He left a better athlete than he came in.
For
at.
sure.
Let's just say that's
absolutely.
the politest, and he'll agree with me on that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we get into rapid fire, I must say you are legit. You have a sheer dog profile, so we are not worthy. That is.
Thank you.
We
God,
grew
how
up
old is that, right?
in the underground of the MMA. We had Kurt Pellegrino. He's from our hometown, so we were watching all the underground stuff coming up. And to me, if someone's got a sheer dog profile, they're legit. So kudos to you, my man.
Thank you. I feel seen.
So we got some rapid fire for you, not rapid fire answers, but just some generic questions we ask all our guests. First one is, do you have a daily practice or a daily ritual?
Yeah, I get up and I meditate virtually every day, virtually. And it's either, very rarely it turns into like just like a journaling session. Like, I get up, I go pee, I make a cup of coffee, I sit on the mat or sit on the cushion. I've done that for years and years and years, and it's one of the best things I can recommend. And
do you do a guided meditation? Do you set a timer, or is it just kind of free flow, how you feel, what you're vibing that day? Yeah, it's, I started in Zen and was the very strict, you don't move, there is no music, you're not having fun, and then moved, learned about Tantra and learned about some other systems. And now sometimes I got headphones on, sometimes it's dead quiet, sometimes I'm kind of just rocking back and forth. It's just my own amalgamation at this point. Excellent. And so you mentioned you make your coffee. How do you brew it? How do you take it? I drink it with a little bit of oat milk, and it's in a French press because that's easiest right now. And I tell you guys, I've reached out to so many damn coffee companies as a podcaster and be like, trust me, you will never have a bigger fan. And I've never been ignored by an industry more than the coffee industry. So I'm still looking. If you know a good coffee sponsor, send them my way. Yeah, well, I will say, I don't know if you dabble and do anything with your water, but we've been using Third Wave water. And we had Charles Nick, one of the founders of the company, on the podcast. And basically what it does is it provides the perfect mineral profile so that it enhances and brings out all the notes of the coffee. So that's one good one. Yeah, but we haven't. Third Wave water. Yeah, it comes in like a little sachet packet, and you put 1 pack in a gallon of water.
Oh,
in
nice.
either like reverse osmosis or just what the
Distilled.
heck's it distilled water. Yeah, distilled
Cool.
water. So and then it gives you the right profile, so it gets all those tasty notes.
Beautiful.
And we use AeroPress.
Gotcha.
But we haven't yet gotten a coffee sponsor either, but we'll let you know once we do.
Yeah, we're all in this together. Yeah.
We got some instant coffee from Mount Hagen sent to us last year, but that was kind of a one and done deal. But same, I've reached out to a couple coffee places and
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
What are
There
you
is
listening?
one
Sorry,
sec.
Rich.
There is a coffee roaster here in Denver. They're called Selfish Pricks.
Uh-huh.
And so we just had one of the founders on podcast that'll be coming out. But yeah, they do Latin America, like a Central South America blend, and so we've got a couple samples coming. Maybe we can build a relationship and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
send them your way.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now called Polysecure, just on different relationship setups. It was recommended by another woman, Dr. Kat Meyer, who I was a guest on her podcast. And I know it may sound odd, but I listen to a lot of my friends' podcasts just because it still fascinates me that like I know that guy, right? And like this is my buddy interviewing someone who's relatively famous. So I listen to Connor Beaton and Man Talks, Mark Groves at the Create the Love, Jeremy Goldberg and Long Distance Love Bombs. Like those are a bunch of them. I love Michaela Boehm. She's the same last name, but we're not related. Or Esther Perel. Like I geek out in kind of like the relationship space. I just started listening to Andy Frasilla's podcast, and a little more on the business front. But yeah, I consume a lot of information.
And then last but certainly not least, pre-March 2020, this used to have a lot more fun, lighthearted feel to it. Now it's taken on a little bit different vibe. But if you ever find yourself going down any rabbit holes, do you get down with conspiracy theories? Have you ever seen Bigfoot? Have you seen aliens? Do you have any questions about JFK? Do you get down that way at all?
I try not to. And when I was 22 in Boston, my senior year of college, I was up on a roof hanging out with a bunch of people, and it was at night. And I remember these lights that came, and it looked like the tail of a kite, but way, way off in the distance, like way, way up there. These like three different whatevers they were, ships, I'm going to call them. And the way they switched positions and rotated and then disappeared, I was like, that wasn't a human aircraft. And I remember winging the other people, you guys watch that? Anybody else see that? And no one saw it. And they told me I was nuts. And now after watching some UFO documentaries and seeing something similar, I'm like, I'm one of the people. So I haven't seen Bigfoot, but I sure as shit have seen some UFOs up there at least 20 years ago.
Was there any psychedelics involved?
There were not. I've seen a lot of weird shit on psychedelics, but not UFOs yet.
Yeah, right on.
The week is young.
Traver, it has been an honor and a pleasure. We really appreciate your time today. It's a great conversation. I think the world needs to hear about what you got going on and how we can all be a part of it. So any stuff you have coming up that you want people to know about, content that you're putting out, where can we direct those people? What sort of stuff can we let everyone know about?
Yeah, I spend most of my time, even though I'm moving away from social media, but I'm still on it a lot, is at Traver Boehm, TraverBoehm on Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of my book or courses, go to manuncivilized.com/the book. Or if you're interested in joining the men's group /the nation. And that's really what I'm watching grow. I was just in Durham, North Carolina over the weekend because they had a group pop up and just went and sat with those guys and listened to their stories and got my mind blown. So I have a workshop coming out here in Jefferson. You go to manuncivilized.com /the uncivilizing, and that's in June. and I'm co-partnering with Dewey Freeman and Michael Gay, and that'll be a fascinating weekend of just men's work. But yeah, keep hitting the site, because now that the world's opening a bit, like I'm getting back out there and teaching. That is my absolute love, is meeting men, talking to men, and really being parts of groups and saying, hey, I have a particular message I'd like you to hear, and take it or leave it. And that seems to be the gold. So I appreciate you guys having me on and giving me access to your audience and having this conversation. So thank you as well.
Yeah, it was an honor and a pleasure. And I love having these conversations, because when I get done, I just feel elated. And, you know, as many grateful things that we have to be grateful for in times of COVID in 2020, there are definitely some times where I feel like I'm just getting dick punches left and right. So when I have conversations or listen to you have other conversations, it really it kind of grounds me and centers me and makes me remember that things are all right and they're going to be all right. So thank you for all that.
Thank you
Traver,
so much
you are the
for
man.
your time
Thank
today.
you so much.
You for
Really
your message.
appreciate it.
Keep on keeping on.
Cheers, guys. I appreciate you too. Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.